Hi, Emmy. How you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well. So I guess before we jump into it, we should probably thank a friend of the show, William Stokey, for kind of helping be the middleman in this and putting this together. I've known him for years through my racing connections and just through the internet in various places. I know you obviously know him from Minnesota.
hmm
So I guess just kind of our first icebreaker question here. How'd you get to know Will?
Yeah, so we were both in the honors program, so we were both in the same sort of class type thing that you have to take as a member of the honors program. And then this past semester we were in the same dorm, so we kind of reconnected through that. So yeah, that's how we know each other. But definitely not through racing. I know nothing about that.
Yeah. Well, it was still nice. I put something on my story, I think, on Instagram about the championship coming up, and Will messaged me and said that he
Oh.
knew who one of the contestants was going to be, and that's kind of how it all started from here.
Cool.
So I'm obviously a huge fan of the show. So there's a lot I want to ask, and I'm sure we'll get into that here in a minute. But first, I just want to give you a chance to tell me a little bit more about yourself. I know from the show that you're a history major. I'd love to know why you chose that, what you're planning to do with that, and why you chose Minnesota.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, I'm a sophomore. I'm a history major. I've just always been really fascinated by history. Growing up, my family and I would, visit historic sites, and I would always read historical fiction books, and it's just always been really interesting to me. So that's why I decided to major in it. Why I chose Minnesota? So I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. There aren't really that many people from Nebraska at Minnesota, but just based on what I saw about the university, I liked it and I thought it might be cool to go to college in a big city, have a little bit of a different experience.
Awesome. And one thing that kind of blew me away watching your first episode. I know you only have like 15, 20 seconds to talk to the host as you're doing kind of the icebreaker segments after the first break, but you were in Paris and toured the Notre Dame Cathedral the day before it made international headlines because of the tragic fire. So just kind of tell me, with not being in that 15-second time constraint here, what that experience was like. And just, I think the word you used was surreal, just a feeling of what happened the day after you visited.
Yeah, so I went to Paris as part of a trip with my high school over spring break when I was a junior. So we went to Paris, Switzerland, and the south of France. And so we were in Paris first. So it was only like our second day in Paris that we toured Notre Dame. We actually weren't even supposed to go there. We were supposed to go to Chartres Cathedral, but because it was Palm Sunday, that cathedral just had so many people there that our tour guide told us that we couldn't go there. So we went to Notre Dame instead, which I don't really know why we weren't going to go there in the first place since it's one of the most famous places in Paris. But we ended up going to Notre Dame, and it was so beautiful. It was a very impactful experience for me to see it, just because it's so old, like so historic, and the craftsmanship is just so overwhelming. But then, yeah, so the next day we were still in Paris, and while we were eating dinner the day after, someone just pulled up their phone and saw that the roof of the cathedral caught fire. And so at first we didn't know, like, is this going to be serious? Are they just going to be able to put it out? But then um, as time went on, we realized that, it was going to be pretty significant damage. And so one of our teachers said, you might have been some of the last people to see Notre Dame as it has been for centuries. So as we walked back that night to the hotel, we could see the flames. We were supposed to go on a river cruise that night, but it didn't happen. And it was so surreal because we had just seen it the day before, and the streets of Paris, they were totally silent. Like there was no one talking or anything. And so we walked pretty far because a lot of the metro stations were closed, and it was totally crazy. We couldn't believe that we just happened to be there on the day that something like that happened.
Yeah, well, actually, I remember where I was too when it happened. I was in one of my communications classes up at college, one of my intro to production classes, and somebody I think had a projector up, and we were watching the footage of it as it was happening. So it was just kind of surreal, even back here in the States, to be watching that happen. I can't imagine how you all must have felt having been there. So I imagine that must have been tough.
Yeah, it was definitely very upsetting to see that. One of my friends told me, who was also on the trip, told me that, Notre Dame had been the most impactful thing she'd seen on the trip so far. And then, the next day it was just, um, never going to be exactly the same. But I'm definitely glad they're working on restoring it.
So I guess we can jump into the Jeopardy stuff now. And I've got to think, being somebody who was on the show, who obviously worked very hard to get on the show, that you must be a pretty big Jeopardy fan yourself. So tell me what your introduction to the show was and how you got to be a fan of the program.
Yeah, so I really started watching it regularly, I think probably in middle school. And so throughout middle and high school, my dad and I would watch the show almost every day. And it was always super fun. I just liked, being able to answer the questions sometimes. And I tried out for the teen version of Jeopardy, and I got to the audition stage, but I didn't get selected that time. Uh, and I started doing Quiz Bowl in high school, so it's kind of similar to Jeopardy. And I think I took the test a couple more times after that. And then, yeah, this time was how it happened to work out. But yeah, my introduction to Jeopardy was really just watching it with my dad because I think we both kind of like trivia and yeah, just knowing random facts.
When you auditioned, was it for the regular show or was it for the I mean, I know you said you auditioned for the teen tournament first. Those couple times before this college tournament, was that for the regular show or was that for something else?
I think, well, it was for Teen Jeopardy, but I think they have a different test for it. Don't exactly remember, but like the audition was with all other teenagers for the teen version of Jeopardy.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and then I know COVID's kind of changed everything in the TV landscape. I know they've kind of tweaked the audition process now with the anytime test. But specifically for the college championship, which was even separate from the syndicated version because it's on primetime on ABC. How did you hear about the college championship, and was the audition process similar to what you'd gone through before, or was it different because of different circumstances?
Yeah, so I think I heard about it because my high school Quiz Bowl teammates also took the test, and so we were all just taking it together, I think. I think the biggest difference is that the audition was on Zoom. So when I was in high school and did the teen version, I had to go to Kansas City to do an in-person audition. And then at that in-person audition, we did a mock game and kind of an interview. But then for this time around, because of COVID, it was on Zoom. So we did a mock game where we clicked a pen next to our head to answer the questions, which was really weird. But I mean, for the mock game, I guess they're not really assessing your knowledge because you've already taken 2 tests at that point. They're really seeing how you call clues and how you are at, speaking and that type of thing. And then we also had an interview where they asked, like, just to get to know us, like, our hobbies and interests and stuff like that.
So they had you just like hold your hand up here like this and pretend
Yeah.
the buzzer in your hand.
Yeah, it was pretty weird. I don't think I have a clicker pen, but it was really just this. So yeah.
Wow. Well, I know I love what Michael Davies is doing. I think he's, especially after the whole controversy with Mike Richards and everything, to step in the interim role, and clearly he's taken it on and loved what he's doing, and to the point where he's publishing the box scores with all the buzzer stats and everything. So I love stats and analytics, so I definitely eat those things up. That's very cool. I watched your episodes back to get ready for the show tonight, and Johnny Gilbert, as he's given his intro, he says 26,000 students from 4,000 schools. So obviously there was a lot of work just to get on the program. And then I feel like, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I heard there were a lot of juniors and a lot of seniors. I feel like you were not the only sophomore, but one of only a few. Did that affect your mindset at all going into the tournament?
Yeah, I think there were only about 4 or 5 other sophomores, but we didn't know who any of the other contestants were until we landed in LA and saw them all there. So I really had no idea what to expect. I don't even know if I don't think I even knew how many people there would be. So yeah, I knew nothing about like the other schools or who the other people were. Yeah, I guess it never really crossed my mind about whether there would be other sophomores, but yeah, it was definitely interesting once I got there to realize, oh, most of these people are older than me.
Yeah. Well, and then we get into your first game here, and I know you started off in the negative for a little while, but you were able to quickly rebound, obviously, and you ended up winning the game. But you know, I'd imagine there's a lot of pressure. I've never been on a game show or a quiz show or anything, but it's much different than just watching it from your couch at home. To be playing for what you're playing for and under the lights and everything. How did you maintain a positive mindset when you were in the negative and got kind of off to a rough start, and then find yourself able to bounce back so well?
Yeah, I guess I just had to stop thinking about the numbers, and just not focus on or just try to get over getting things wrong because the day before we had or I guess 2 days before because they filmed the quarterfinals over 2 days. But the day before filming started, we had a rehearsal and I did pretty bad in the rehearsal. Like, I couldn't really get the buzzer time down. So I was really nervous going into my first game and then getting in the negatives. I just had to be like, okay, I'm not gonna let this throw me off. And just keep playing and then keep trying and um yeah, and just not freeze up and stop attempting. So it was really just about getting over just like not letting it get to me, I guess.
Yeah, well, I know you found the daily double in the Jeopardy rounds, and you were able to convert that, so that certainly helped. And then we were very impressed watching your first episode because not only did you have a lock game, you had a healthy lock game going into Final Jeopardy. And that was, I've got to tell you, that was probably the best I felt during the entire tournament because I know all three of you missed the Final Jeopardy clue. I happened to know that it was Arizona and New Mexico. So that made me feel kind of good about myself. But in your case, it didn't matter because you already had such a big lead. So what were you feeling at that moment, knowing that you were going to go on to the semifinals and that you had played so well?
Yeah, it was really crazy because throughout the game, I mean, you can see all three contestants' scores throughout, but I wasn't really paying attention. I mean, I was, but I wasn't really focusing on that. And then at the end, I was like, wait, I'm gonna win. I'm gonna win this. It was pretty wild. I was definitely glad I didn't have to do any really weird strategies with my Final Jeopardy wager because I didn't really study the strategy. But yeah, I don't know. It was crazy because I didn't really expect to win, especially because I did so bad at the rehearsals that I was just really excited and yeah, it was wild.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you brought up the wager strategy here because there was a lot of talk online because I think the format was kind of strange with how things worked out with 36 contestants to go from 36 to 12 and then to 3. So that meant that one of the contestants that won their semifinal game wasn't going to be in the finals. And I like what they're doing for Isaac with the second chance tournament. I think that's great. But, especially before we knew that was going to be a thing, I think there was a little bit of criticism with how they were doing that. But, for you all, I think that kind of changed how you had to strategize when it came to your Final Jeopardy wagers, because in your semifinal game, it was a very close match all throughout. I think like a contestant in your position on a regular show, I think you certainly wouldn't try to bet everything and maximize your score because you assume that your two opponents are going to wager everything because they almost have to. And if everybody gets it wrong, then at least you'd have something left over. But in this situation, you're going for the highest score possible because only the top 3 of the 4 winners are going to move on. So how did that affect your wager strategy, especially considering the position you were in your semifinal game?
Yeah. It really didn't take me that long to be like, okay, I'm just gonna have to bet it all just because the category historic structures, I was like, there's a good chance that the other two might know it. So being only 200 behind, I was like, I guess I just have to go for it. I mean, I don't know how much the format made me like affected my strategy, but yeah, I was just like, I'm just gonna have to go for it. Um, I didn't really consider doing anything else.
Yeah, well, I know you said you didn't pay as much attention to the scores in the first game. As the second game was winding down, were you aware how close it was as you were uh, going through the last final clues and aware that it could come down to Final Jeopardy with how close you all were?
Yeah, I definitely did pay a little more attention to the scores in the second game, and I kind of wish I hadn't because I think it kind of psyched me out a little bit. But yeah, and then once the scores at the end of the Double Jeopardy round were shown, I was like, oh my gosh, it was it was really wild. Like I was not expecting it, or it was just so unusual that how close it was. Yeah, I was like, dang, this is going to be a very intense game.
Did you know what the other two winning scores were at that point? Because obviously the audience knows. But I would think, somebody playing in your game, the third game, or the last game might have an advantage because when you play in the first game, you don't know what any of the future scores are going to be. If you have the opportunity to watch the first couple of games, you know what you have to hit in order to be ahead of at least one of the contestants and be in a position to go into the finals. So did they keep you isolated backstage that you didn't have that advantage, or was that something that you had in your back pocket that you could have used?
Yeah, so we were actually sequestered during the semifinals. So we were actually in the Wheel of Fortune stage, which is right next to the Jeopardy stage, but that's where they kept us during the quarterfinal game that we weren't, or the day of filming quarterfinals that we weren't filming. And then also while we were being sequestered during the semifinals. So we got to pick a movie, and I think we watched Scott Pilgrim versus the World. Um, and so once we got up to the stage to film our semifinal, they told us who the first two winners were, but we didn't know their scores.
So that actually brings up a good point because I know, like I said, COVID has changed everything. I trying to think of when, like the Omicron wave was spiking, and I know obviously you tape months in advance here. But what was it like being on set, and how many? I imagine they were still pretty strict with the precautions and everything, and where you all could be and everything like that. What was that like?
Yeah, so we filmed this in we filmed it November 19th through 24th. So at that point, LA was pretty strict, like probably it was definitely stricter than like Minneapolis. Um, and so and on set specifically, they had like a COVID officer to make sure that we were keeping socially distanced. So there was no live audience. So because of COVID, and so there was like tape on the chairs to show that we should sit far apart, and then we had to wear KN95 masks all the time, and we weren't allowed to eat or drink on set. Like they would take us outside, and then we would sit on dots, like basically in the parking lot, to eat or drink and get snacks. So it was definitely kind of weird. And it was also kind of weird not having a live audience. So if you're listening, you can hear the laugh track, and it's a little bit awkward sometimes if you know it's there. Um, but yeah, overall it wasn't too bad, I don't think. And we did have to get COVID tested. We had to find one within 48 hours of our flight out to LA, and then we got tested again while we were there, and then we got tested again one more time, I think on the second or third day of filming or something like that. So they were definitely pretty strict with it, but I wouldn't say it like ruined the experience in any way.
Yeah, well, I've just heard from a couple other contestant stories that they've taken it very seriously, and that it's probably the last place you would expect to contract the virus with how strict they've been about everything. So I'm not surprised to hear that.
Yeah, as far as I know, no one got sick from it, so it worked whatever they did, I guess.
That's good. And another thing I've heard is, you mentioned there being no live audience. I've heard that since the pandemic started, Johnny Gilbert's been dubbing the introductions remotely. Was somebody else there doing it as you guys were taping, and then they have him come in and fill it in post?
Yeah, so it was Sarah from the Clue crew who was
Right.
yeah, who was saying it while we were there. But then for the finals, because they filmed the semifinals and finals on the same day, even the semifinalists who got eliminated could watch the finals. And Johnny Gilbert actually did come in person and say the intro. So that was pretty cool that we all got to see him. And I think it was the first time he'd actually done it in person with Mayim. So he said something like, "Oh, I've said like your host Mayim Bialik so many times," and she was like, "I've said thank you, Johnny Gilbert, so many times," and then it was their first time actually doing it in real time. So that was pretty cool to see him there.
Did you get to meet him?
He did, say hi to those of us who were sitting in the audience, but I didn't. I don't think I talked to him personally, but we still did get to see him, and yeah, he said hi to us.
Yeah, and I guess one question I want to ask you, because I think you've got a different perspective on this than anybody I've talked to about this subject. Obviously, there's been a lot of uh, controversy and everything since Alex Trebek passed away about the hosting position and everything. You got to play 2 games with Mayim as the host. Does that affect who you think is best suited for the role permanently for the Daily Show? And do you think it should be Mayim, or do you not let your experience get in the way? Maybe you still think it should be Ken, or do you think there's another candidate that they might consider bringing in?
Ooh. Hmm. Okay. Well, honestly, I haven't been able to watch the syndicated show as much since coming to college, so I haven't seen most of the people who have been guest host or host for any amount of time. But I would say Mayim did a good job, at least with us. And so yeah, I'm not really sure I can say what they should do, but yeah, I don't know. I think Mayim did a good job.
Yeah, well, I remember hearing Amy Schneider, no relation to me, of course. She was being interviewed, I think, on Andy Cohen's show after her run came to an end, and Andy asked her, do you think Ken should be the permanent host? And of course, she did all her episodes with Ken, and she gave a pretty strong endorsement for Ken to get the job permanently. So I guess we can stay on the subject for a little bit longer here. Were you following the whole drama that was going on in August with Mike Richards and the podcast tapes that have been leaked and everything like that?
Not really, honestly. I mean, I know they did pretty thorough background checks on all of us, so because I guess they didn't want a repeat of that situation. I mean, but yeah, I didn't really follow it that closely.
Yeah, well, I had mixed feelings on the whole situation. And I think the more that has come out about Mike, not just since he's ended up having to step down and eventually losing the EP role as well. I think it's become overwhelmingly clear that he probably wasn't the optimal choice for the position permanently. And then, of course, you have the controversy of him being the producer, and did he basically hire himself, or how much of a say did he have in that? So, I'm sure they're going to do everything they can to avoid a repeat of that. So that's why I think, if I had to make my own pick, I would say I'd probably want Ken to get the Daily Show, because Mayim's got the primetime stuff going for her already. But I think that's something that is important to have for the show, and I think part of why Jeopardy is so loved is because Alex was so loved, and I think without a permanent person in that role, you don't have the opportunity to build that identity back, and to be bouncing back and forth between both of them and going through the parade of guest hosts like they were last year. Ultimately, I don't think that's a great strategy in the long run. Obviously, with Alex's sudden passing, you have to do that to get started with it and everything, and just the first few weeks after that. But I think going forward, it would be nice to see Ken get the job.
Yeah, I definitely think it would make sense to have just one host going forward, just because, yeah, I agree that Alex Trebek was definitely a big part of Jeopardy and like what made it so popular.
Yeah, so I guess we'll draw it back kind of here to your final episode. Obviously, you came up just short. Was there any sense of disappointment knowing that you were so close and you got the final Jeopardy clue, and obviously it didn't matter because both your opponents did as well. But knowing that had just one or two clues gone slightly differently, you might have been in the position to go to the finals.
Yeah, it definitely was a little frustrating at first, especially with the whole only one or two clues could have made a difference because um like there were some clues that I thought about where I'm like, oh, why did I buzz in and get that wrong? That was like a dumb thing to say, or I knew it, but I just wasn't confident and I should have buzzed in. And so yeah, I definitely did kind of beat myself up a little bit in the moment, but overall I'm happy with how I did because uh Liz and Kristen and I were all really evenly matched. And yeah, I was really happy to see Liz win and go on to the finals. And yeah, watching it back, there were a few clues where I was like, oh, dang it. But um, yeah, overall, I think it was still a good experience despite that.
Yeah, well, I was just going to ask. I guess you have watched your episodes back a couple of
Yeah,
times.
or at least I watched them when they aired.
Yeah, yeah. I saw them when they aired, and I just caught up on Hulu to refresh myself to get ready for tonight. But yeah, when you're watching them back, is it? I mean, I imagine it's a slightly different perspective because you know what happens, and the vast majority of the rest of the audience doesn't. But were there some areas where you watch it back and you think I could have done something differently here, or I maybe should have wagered a different amount there, or anything like that?
Yeah. So for my first game, I kind of, or okay, well, a lot of the filming process was a blur. So for my first game, I definitely didn't remember a lot of the clues or categories or anything. But for the second game, I think a lot of the stuff I got wrong or that I should have done kind of stuck in my mind. So I already kind of remembered it from November of, oh, I should have done that differently. But I think overall, I mean, there were a lot of things that I definitely forgot about because there was like 3 months between filming and airing. So, um, yeah, there were a few things where I was like, oh, I forgot I got that wrong, and I definitely should not have gotten that wrong. But there were also things where I was like, I don't think I knew that in the moment just now, but I knew it back in November when we filmed it somehow. So there were some good surprises too.
Yeah, how tough is it to keep it a secret for as long as you have to between the taping date and obviously when we all get to see it as the audience?
Yeah, it was definitely really hard. I think it was a little bit of a longer gap between taping and airing for the tournament, just because I guess the weekend before Thanksgiving is a convenient time to film for college students because like I flew from Minneapolis to LA and then straight home to Lincoln, Nebraska. Um, so for a while we couldn't tell anyone that we're even on it. And so luckily with it being right before Thanksgiving, I think people kind of forgot that, I was gone. I only had to miss like a couple classes. So people weren't like, where were you? But um then as the anticipation built, it definitely got harder, especially because they released promos with footage of us in it before saying that we were allowed to um announce that we were on it. So it was kind of a gray area of like there's literally promos on official social media from Jeopardy or ABC with our faces in it, but we haven't gotten the actual go ahead to tell people. So it was a little bit weird. But yeah, I guess I kind of told people gradually. Because I posted the very first promo that I'm in it for like a nanosecond, and so only a couple people even saw me in it. But then eventually, I think only only about like a week and a half or so before the first episode aired did they give us our official promo pictures. Um, and then I could finally post, but it definitely took a long time, or it felt like a really long time.
So you weren't even allowed to tell people that you were going to be on the show, let alone what happened and how much you won and everything.
Yeah, so they told us that we could tell the results only to people who would have been there if there was a live audience. So the only people who knew the results were my parents. And then yeah, then I just told everyone else I was gonna be on it. So then obviously I could only tell people the first air date because otherwise I would spoil that I won the quarterfinal. Um, So yeah, everyone was really excited and they were trying to badger me, like my friends, like to or try to get it out of me how I did and that kind of thing. But I had to be like, no, I can't tell you. I don't want Sony coming after me or anything. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I imagine at least your parents would have to know, right? Because I mean, somebody has to know that you've got this plane ticket out to LA and are going to be on the show at least. So,
Yeah, I think at least one of the contestants did somehow manage not to tell their parents about it until afterwards, which I feel like would be really hard to do. But yeah, I told them, and um, I also told them because if you got eliminated in the quarterfinals, then they would try to find a flight for you to go back a day earlier. So then I told my parents, like, I don't know if I'll go back or not. But then after I won my quarterfinal, I was like, well, I'm definitely not going back early. And so yeah.
yeah, I remember I've seen interviews with Ken and going through his run of 74 games, him constantly having to come up with excuses to go miss a couple of days of work because he can't spoil the results, obviously, but he's got to go back because he's the returning champion, and that went on for many, many weeks. So that's
Yeah.
yeah, I know that's got to be a tough secret to keep there. Um, so yeah, I mean, you talk about the reaction to you being on the show. Did you have like a watch party on campus or anything when all this was happening?
Yeah, so I did have a watch party with some of my friends. We just kind of made some frozen pizza and watched it together, and it was really fun because they were all really supportive of me and really excited. And then especially after I won my first game, everyone was really excited. And then for the second game, everyone was also excited, even though it did feel a little bit weird to promote the game, knowing that I was going to lose. Especially because I think the University of Minnesota did not like promote me on social media at all until after I had won my first game. So I feel like more people watch the game where I lose than the game where I win, which was kind of weird. But yeah, so I did have some fun little watch parties.
So being a semifinalist, you come away with 20,000, right? That
Hmm.
was the final. Yeah. Well, I just graduated college not too long ago, so I'd imagine a lot of that's going to go towards tuition and things like that. But have you gotten to the point where you've bought any luxuries with your prize winnings or anything like that?
Ooh, so what I'm actually hoping to do with the money is study abroad this summer in Ireland.
Okay.
Um, so that's what I'm hoping to, or at least some of it. Hoping to put some of it towards. So that'll be my luxury item, I guess. But yeah, I'm hoping to be there this summer and hopefully travel around a little bit while I'm there too.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I guess one final question here. I brought up the second chance tournament briefly. If you had the opportunity to play again, would you want to, or are there other game shows that you'd be interested in further down the road? Do you have any feelings on that?
Ooh. Well, they did tell us that I think other than Isaac, I don't think any other college contestants will be going on the second chance tournament. But I think if I did have the opportunity to be on Jeopardy again, I feel like I would because it was just really fun. Uh, and I haven't really done Quiz Bowl or trivia type things since high school, so it was super fun to get back into it. And um, I don't know, I don't really watch that many other game shows, so I guess if you know of any that I should try out for, I guess that would be could be something to look into. But yeah.
Yeah, well, I know a lot of Jeopardy contestants have been on the chase since they brought that back.
Mm,
That's obviously another trivia game. So a lot of I think there have been some episodes where of the three contestants, there's this one person here surrounded by two others that they're going to be working with, and they've both been on Jeopardy, and that one contestant hasn't. So I guess that kind of makes for a little bit of an intimidating situation if you're the only one that hasn't been on Jeopardy before and doesn't have that on their resume. But um, that's probably my favorite quiz show beyond Jeopardy, obviously. So who knows? I know they're casting for the third season or have been the last couple of weeks here. So
oh, nice. Well, I'll have to check that out then maybe.
uh, are you still in touch with any of the contestants you've met through the tournament?
Yeah, so we did make a group chat and follow each other on social media and kept in touch. And so especially when the tournament was airing, we were definitely messaging every day and really excited to see other people's schools and how they were supporting them, and to just relive the experience a little bit together. And we were all really excited for Jaskaran winning. And yeah, I mean, the group chat and stuff has died down a little bit now that the episodes have finished airing, but I think we will keep in touch. Some of us have met up with each other. I met up with Chance Persons, who goes to Creighton, so he's kind of local to Nebraska and Minnesota because he's from Burnsville. But yeah, who knows? So I guess if we happen to run into each other like with any of the other contestants, it would just be a really fun thing to meet up.
All right. Well, Emmey, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great talking with you, and yeah, best of luck and spend your money wisely. I know I think that's a great answer, what you're going to do going abroad there. So enjoy that. Hopefully COVID dies down a little bit. I keep feeling like we're coming out of it. And, after the Omicron wave, I think hopefully we're finally on the back end of it. So I hope you get that opportunity, and best of luck with the rest of your time in Minnesota.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. This is really fun.
Yes. And of course, thanks again to Will for helping us put this
Yeah,
together.
thanks, Will.